Feeling stressed, overwhelmed? It's time to unstress your life and focus on controlling what you can control. I'm Dr. Ron Ehrlich, host of the Unstress Health Podcast, inviting you to join the Unstress Health community and discover a holistic approach that helps you more effectively face the daily challenges of our modern world and effectively recover each and every day. Unstress Health is here to provide you with advice and support that is independent of industry and influence, an influence that's easy to miss but difficult to ignore. Our focus is on building mental fitness. Your mind can be your best friend or your worst enemy. Mental fitness is the key. Our three-phase approach targets mindset, boost your positive intelligence quotient, and move from self-sabotage to self-mastery. Secondly, the challenges. We redefine what stress means in our modern world. And thirdly, recovery. Master the 5 pillars of health. As a member of the Unstress Health community, you'll turn obstacles into opportunities with expert-led courses, curated podcasts, personalised health assessments, a supportive community, and much, much more. Join Unstress Health today, and together, let's not just survive, but thrive. Click on the link below or visit unstresshealth.com. Well, the subject of today is something that just literally surrounds us. We bathe ourselves in it. We embrace it. We're obsessed by it. It's addictive. It's actually what delivers all of our internet and streaming services and Wi-Fi radiation, electromagnetic radiation. It's everywhere, and you don't read a lot about the problems of it in the mainstream press, even though there are literally thousands of scientific articles written that alert us to its possible dangers. Yes, we will not be hearing about this kind of thing in the mainstream media. My guest today, though, is a champion of that very message, Lyn McLean. Lyn is an electromagnetic field consultant, trainer. She is passionate about helping people understand and reduce their exposure to electromagnetic pollution to create safer homes and families. She's the director of EMR Australia, which we will have links to, and she also publishes a newsletter regularly, information, which, as I said, usually includes the latest scientific research on this issue, information and research that you just don't get in the mainstream media. Lyn is also a published author, having written 4 books on electromagnetic radiation, co-authored a peer-reviewed scientific paper, and writes regular blogs on science and international developments on this issue. She has also been involved in or commented on the major political and regulatory developments in this area for nearly 3 decades. I interviewed Lyn. She was one of our very first interviews almost 400 episodes ago. But of course, since then, a lot has happened, and we need an update to remind us of that. I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with Lyn McLean. Welcome back, Lyn.
Thanks, Ron. It's good to be talking to you today.
Lyn, what we're talking about today is something that is a part of modern world, of everybody's life. We carry it around with us. We put it in our homes. We're literally bathed in it. I wondered if we might just, and people don't really know the risks of being exposed to electromagnetic pollution, especially from the devices we choose to use and buy for our homes. Can we just talk about that issue of electromagnetic pollution? I don't think many people will be thinking of it in those terms.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the problem is we can't see it. You know, it's not like smoke where we can see that there's all that grey stuff out there that's potentially interfering with us. But this is invisible. And what we find is that a lot of people have got absolutely no idea how much electromagnetic pollution is in their homes, and it's going to come from everything electrical. So from all your appliances, from all your wiring, from conductive water pipes, from the power points that have got the wiring to them. So those are the electromagnetic fields that are from electrical sources. But on top of that, we've got wireless radiation, which is probably the better thing for us to be talking about today, because that's easier for us to manage or control. And that's from all of the wireless devices in and around our homes. So that's going to be our mobile phones, our wireless modem or router, our baby monitors, our tablets, our computers, all our smart devices, maybe a smart electricity meter, our smart TV, even smart light globes and smart appliances. So now there's a trend for appliances to be made to emit radiation. So-called smart. I don't think it's very smart at all, but it's very easy to buy some of these appliances, to put them in your home and have no idea that they're irradiating you, but they are. So if you look at all of those sources together, that is a lot of radio frequency radiation transmitters in your home that's affecting everybody in and potentially around your home. And that's something that we can manage. That's something that we can improve.
But, the interesting thing, and there's a lot of similarities between environmental toxins within the home. We are exposed to tens of thousands of chemicals, and the natural assumption for the majority of people is, hey, listen, if they're on the supermarket shelf, they must have been tested. They must be safe for human beings. And surely the same is true of Wi-Fi radiation, wireless radiation. Yeah. What's your response to that?
Well, that's a perfectly reasonable assumption. We do assume that what we can buy is safe. But the trouble is that's absolutely far from the truth, probably for a lot of chemicals, but definitely for radiation. And that's because a lot of these devices are not tested for safety before they go onto the market. So what they have to do is demonstrate that they comply with a standard. Now, that would be great if the standard was reliable, but the standard that we have in Australia is based on international guidelines, and these guidelines have been demonstrated, very compellingly demonstrated, to be flawed. The science behind them is not reliable. It's old, it's flawed, and it doesn't protect us. So essentially what we have around the world is standards in different countries and these international guidelines that are essentially, you could say, designed to protect the industry, so the industry is able to make these products, to make lots of money from these products, to roll out these telecommunications networks. But does human safety factor into it? Does the safety of, our bees, our animals, our environment factor into it? And the answer is no. These standards don't even consider environmental impacts. But, for the purposes of our conversation, it's the effects on people that we're concerned about. And what we can say is that there are now thousands of peer-reviewed scientific studies that are showing harmful effects of this radiation. So that's compelling evidence that what's out there on the shelves is not necessarily safe.
The standards, the international standards, the Australian standards are one and the same, I guess. Can you kind of give us a 101 appraisal of what is it they're looking at? What are they testing? Why is it so safe, in inverted commas?
Well, they're assuming that you only have to worry about radiation if the amount of radiation that you're exposed to heats the body up by 1 degree Celsius. So they're concerned about the short-term heating effects of exposure, right? Only the short-term heating effects of exposure. But the problem is that we're being exposed to radiation that's not necessarily heating our body up by 1 degree Celsius, but also it's not necessarily short-term. If you're living next to a mobile phone tower, or you're sleeping with your mobile phone underneath your pillow or next to your bed, this is not short-term exposure. This is long-term chronic exposure and it's cumulative exposure, because we're getting it from the phone tower, the phone, the Wi-Fi modem or router. We're getting all of these different frequencies for long periods of time. This is no longer short-term exposure. So the standards are just not considering the long-term non-heating effects of radiation. But these there's a lot of research now that is showing that those effects are, showing that radiation is having harmful effects on the body. So it's doing things like causing DNA damage, affecting our cells, it's affecting our brain waves, it's affecting our hormones. One of those hormones is melatonin, which is helps protect against cancer. So that's one of the ones that's been reduced by exposure to this radiation. But it's having many, many effects on our body, including generating free radicals or not counteracting free radicals. So these harmful effects have got the potential to cause long-term health problems. And we've already seen increases in brain tumours in people who have used mobile phones for long periods of time, and particularly for young people who started using mobile phones when they were young. We see increases in cancer. We've seen, there's research showing increases in breast cancer for people who carry their mobile phones, or for women who carried their mobile phones in their bras. We're seeing testicular and sperm damage that's consistent with infertility, and we all know that there's a massive increase in infertility in Western countries. So we're seeing reductions in immunity too. So lots of problems, health problems and symptoms that are caused by exposure to this radiation.
It's extraordinary, really, to think that heat is being used as a measure of potential harm, because if the same were used to determine whether X-rays were good for you or not, we would be, my goodness, I'd hate to think how long you'd have to expose a patient to an X-ray before it started to heat up. And we know that too much X-ray exposure is not good for you. That seems kind of extraordinary in itself, doesn't it?
Oh, well, it's very convenient, because if you've got if you've got a cutoff point and you can say, oh, it's only dangerous after this point, that allows you to let all of that other radiation slip through into society and be used by people. And you can say, oh, well, it complies with the standard. It's not causing short-term heating effects. So isn't that good?
Mm-hmm. No, it's interesting also, because we've done quite a few programs on mitochondrial function and how important that is for absolutely every disease. And we've made the point that when you look at what goes on in mitochondria, it's called the electron transport chain, because that's what creates the energy. Electron transports within each and every cell, and nerves are fired by microcurrents.
Yes.
And brain waves, and every cell functions on microcurrents. But somehow this radiation, which is electrons and currents, no problem at all.
Absolutely. And we know that if we stand in an electromagnetic field, that field is induced in our body. We know our body is impacted by these external radiation. But what we forget is exactly what you're saying, that our body is an electrical device. What's the right word? We are electrical beings, and there's a lot of research on that, and it's fascinating research. And our healing process has got to do with minute electrical currents in the body. So if we start stuffing around with this, we start stuffing around with our health and our well-being. And it makes perfect sense that if you're bombarding your body with anything that's not natural, that's man-made, that's not been tested for safety adequately, that you're really running a risk. And why are we doing that? And it comes back to, well, there are financial reasons for doing this. That financial reasons are the only viable reason for doing it, because you certainly wouldn't do this for people's health or well-being. So this is making a lot of people a lot of money, but the trouble is that we are the ones that are missing out. And so it comes back to us about what can we do to look after ourselves and protect our health, and actually be saying no to big business, saying, well, actually, I'm not going to buy these products because we know science is showing that they're not good for us.
Yes, it's so interesting, Lyn, isn't it? There may well be thousands of peer-reviewed articles, and it may well make sense from a biological, physiological, biochemical, bioelectrical point of view. But we're not going to hear about that in the mainstream press, because this very device that you and I are communicating on, if we started, here we are actually talking about, hey guys, what you're actually listening to, what you're actually holding as you listen to this podcast or this TV program or this streaming service or this mobile phone or this social media platform, that's all bad for you.
Doesn't have to be, though, because I'm talking to you on a computer that doesn't have any wireless capacity. I can ring you on my phone that doesn't have any wireless capacity. So I use safe technology, and safe technology is available. It's not easy to access. We have it, but we don't have to be using wireless. There is no need. I repeat, there is no need for us to be using wireless basically at all. An example of that is wireless baby monitors. It horrifies me to think that nearly every baby out there right at the moment has got a radio frequency transmitter close to its head. Now, why? And the reason is because there's been some good marketing done saying, this is a great idea. Go and buy it. It's making someone money. But we could simply unplug them all right this moment, and our kids would actually be better off. Our families would be better off. We'd be better off.
Yes, well, I think there have been literally thousands of generations that have survived very well without a baby monitor. But and we're going to come to some of the solutions. But the reality is that devices are emitting more radiation than ever. Where are we at? Things have changed. We're up to 5G. Tell us a little bit about what that actually means. People think, oh, great, we're on 5G. I wonder when we'll get to 6G or whatever that means. What does it mean? How's the radiation escalating year by year?
In so many ways. One is that I said that we've got so many devices in our home that we didn't know about, or we maybe still don't know about. So our light globes, our fridges, our all sorts of appliances are emitting radiation. So we're being exposed to that. The new technologies that we buy are emitting more radiation. So it seems to me just a few years ago, we all used to use wired modems and for internet, and so no radiation. Now, within a short period of time, we've had this explosion of really high power wireless modems and routers. And a lot of this came about after NBN was installed and people were kind of forced to get new modems and routers. Now, these emit heaps of radiation compared to some of the early models. And this radiation, in some cases, is enough to blanket an entire farm. So imagine that in your apartment, sitting in front of a wireless modem or router, or having in the cupboard next to you, it's emitting so much radiation that it could extend across a farm. So obviously it's extending across streets and blocks in our suburban cities. So much more radiation than the average person needs. Why are we doing that? But then we've got devices that no longer turn off. So it used to be that you didn't want your mobile phone to be irradiating you, so you put it on airplane mode. Now, for many mobile phones, that just doesn't work anymore.
Really?
Airplane mode doesn't turn off radiation. Yeah. And then we think, all right, well, we don't want to be irradiated as we, walk up the street or something. So we turn our mobile phones off. But that doesn't always turn the radiation off either. I know, it's astonishing.
Hang on, I'm just a bit shocked by, I've always turned my airplane mode off. If I have it in my pocket, I'm walking down the beach, I turn on aircraft mode, airplane mode, and I turn the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth off, thinking, but not even turning the phone off? Oh, my goodness. What do we do? We've got to throw them away. Well, you don't have one, Lyn. I know you don't have a mobile phone, do you?
I have it, and it's in the back drawer, the back of my drawer, and it comes out maybe once or twice a year.
Okay.
Hopefully it doesn't get used, but yeah, it's crazy, and I'm shocked by what I measure when I go into people's homes, because it used to be that you'd turn the mobile phone off, you'd check it, everything was fine, or it was only emitting a bit of radiation. But what comes out of these devices now is amazing. And I've had people say to me, look, I'm super worried about the mobile phone tower out there. And you check their homes, and the biggest source of radiation is two things: their wireless modem, their mobile phone. And they have no idea that these devices that they carry around in their pocket, maybe next to their skin or in their bras or wherever else they carry them, or near their reproductive organs, that these things are emitting so much radiation. They are.
But turning the phone off? I mean, surely.
You'd think so. That's what the off button is for, but it's not working. And the same on a modem or router. People press the off button and think, all right, I've just turned off Wi-Fi, and so my modem or router is safe. But actually, in most cases, the modem or router is still emitting radiation. So the off button might make you feel good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the device isn't irradiating you. We have radiation-free modems and routers, so it comes back to, well, why are we using these devices at all, especially because we can't trust them. And then we have modems or routers. You can get into the settings and you can turn off the wireless, so that will mean that a modem or router is no longer emitting radiation. But we can't trust that either, because new updates come in and the wireless turns back on. So suddenly you have a radiating modem or router again, and you think that it's safe. So if you get into the settings, or you've got a modem or router where somebody's got into the settings for you, keep measuring, because that might be emitting radiation now. We can't trust that any wireless device is not going to be irradiating us without our knowledge.
Okay, so I guess to not measure nowadays would be kind of a bit naive. What's the simplest way for people to measure the radiation they're exposed to in their homes on a daily basis, to monitor it?
Let me stretch over here 1 second. All right, so I'm going to try and show you that. Yeah, I think you can see that, the camera now. This is a new meter that we've got. It detects wireless radiation. It's fairly economical one. You basically press the button to turn it on. You've got series of coloured lights that show there. Green is pretty okay, orange is a lot less okay, and red is what we would like to avoid. So you can see at a glance whether this is whether something is emitting radiation. You can see, is there radiation coming from my modem? How much is coming from my modem? How much is coming from my baby monitor? Is my airplane mode actually working? And so forth. And, if there's radiation, maybe a mobile phone tower out there, you can measure that too. But I agree with you that I think that now we're at a point in society where we actually have to measure to find out what's going on in our homes. Or, our schools, for example, our kids are sitting underneath wireless access points. So the person who's sitting underneath them is being exposed to more radiation than the person that's sitting over there. We're getting exposed at home, at work, at school. I think we need to know what we're exposed to, because how can we deal with it if we don't know what's there?
What's the cost of of the simplest device for measuring? What is that cost?
This is $212.
Wow.
So
really, that's pretty insignificant in comparison. Considering how ubiquitous it is. You can decide whether it's important enough to you or not, but at least find out what's going on. Because and interestingly, you use the schools as an example. I think I'm correct. In France, they've taken Wi-Fi radiation out of schools because they use something called the precautionary principle to guide their public health measures rather than using industry information to, I think it used to be called the tobacco playbook, where, hey, look, it's so controversial whether cigarettes are a problem or not. That argument went on for 60 years. We knew it was in the 1940s, and it wasn't until the 1990s that we really got action. And it was called the tobacco playbook, but you could translate that into this area. We're not sure whether that's really a problem or not. But the precautionary principle, tell our listener a little bit about what the precautionary principle is.
Yeah, well, we don't have to wait till we're all sick and dying of cancer and we've got conclusive proof that something is dangerous to actually do something about it. And it's the same with anything in society. We don't know that if we drive down the street without our seatbelts on, that we're going to die or our kids are going to die. But we put the seatbelt on anyway. It's a precautionary approach. We put fences around our pools in backyards to stop our kids falling into the pool, even if maybe they can swim or they're great swimmers or whatever. So there are lots of things that we do in society as a precaution to prevent harm. So why aren't we doing the same thing in this? And years ago, I was involved in standard committees or writing submissions to the standards committees when standards for electric and magnetic fields and for radio frequency fields were being developed. And I and my colleague were always saying, look, let's have a precautionary approach and let's put these suggestions in as ways that we could minimise this. And I know that when I was on committees with Australia's Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency, that's the regulator, our PANSA, the same thing. I was saying, well, we need precautions. Let's tell people how to reduce exposure. But by and large, that never happened. And we know the reason. It's because we don't want to give the impression that technology that everybody loves, that's making lots and lots of money for people, could be a risk. But that being said, a lot of people might know, if you look at your instruction manual for your mobile phone, if you look at the fine print, guess what it says? Hold the mobile phone a little bit away from your head, so you don't press it right against your ear. There's supposed to be a little gap of a few millimetres to keep it further away from your brain to reduce the amount of radiation absorption into the brain. So, manufacturers are already putting that in, those warnings in, to minimise their liability for when this becomes a big legal issue.
Hi, Dr. Ron here, and I want to invite you to join our Unstress Health community. Now, like this podcast, it's independent of industry and focuses on taking a holistic approach to human health and to the health of the planet. The two are inseparable. There are so many resources available with membership, including regular live Q&As on specific topics with special guests, including many with our amazing Unstress Health Advisory panel. Now, we've done hundreds of podcasts, all worth listening to, with some amazing experts on a wide range of topics. Many are world leaders. But with membership, we have our Unstress Lab podcast series, where we take the best of several guests and carefully curate specific topics for episodes which are jam-packed full of valuable insights. So join the Unstress Health community. If you're watching this on our YouTube channel, click on the link below or just visit unstresshealth.com to see what's on offer and join now. I look forward to connecting with you. I was aware of that from our last conversation a few years back about the fact that the mobile device that you bought has got embedded in its instructions is keep it away from your head. Oh, it's in the fine print. But listen, a lot of people are aware of it, and there's these so-called solutions out there. Can you give us some examples of solutions that people are attracted to for all the right reasons, but may not be as effective as they claim to be?
Yeah, well, lots of them actually. You can get anything on the internet that you want. So if you want a solution for electromagnetic fields, look on the internet and you'll find buy this product, do this thing, solve all your problems. And the trouble is they're not going to necessarily do that. The easy things, plug this in and it will make all the radiation in your home go away, all the electromagnetic pollution. Well, wouldn't it be great if that worked? But if it did work, I wouldn't have been doing this for the last nearly 30 years. And nor would the researchers out there and the shielding experts out there be doing it either. So the simple things like plug it in, turn it on, and magically it will disappear don't work. And if you've got a meter, you can actually measure. Is the radiation still there? Yep. Turn on the PowerPoint with this device plugged in, but the radiation is still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. So be careful about claims that you can't test. Test it, measure yourself, determine whether something works or not. People talk about products that harmonise radiation. Well, that's a nice word. It sounds good. But again, if you measure, you'll see the radiation's still there. It hasn't gone away. It hasn't stopped. It hasn't changed in any way that we can determine. It's still there and you're still taking a risk by being exposed to it. What else? Other things that don't work. One of the things that I'm a bit concerned about is people buy things like laptop plates. They put them on their lap and they put their laptop on top of it and it's supposed to stop the radiation going into your body. And then people think, oh, that's great, I can use my laptop and can use it safely. But the trouble is what it's doing is it's reflecting that radiation back into the trunk of your body. So it's potentially increasing your exposure. So we have to be really cautious about what we see advertised out there. And I say this as somebody who runs a business, but I only sell products that can be demonstrated to work. So the test reports are there that show these things work, or you can measure and see if you put the canopy in place, is your exposure less inside the canopy than it was before? It's pretty easy to see. So I think we have to make decisions based on our intelligence rather than wishful thinking. If we think, oh, great, it would be really good to buy that product and, emotionally I can feel happy about it, but our minds might be telling us, well, actually, it's too good to be true. This is not going to work. And another thing that concerns me too is a product that I actually sell. We sell shielding, so we have shielding paints and fabrics and window film. And sometimes people contact me and say, great, I just want to shield my house. So if I put my business hat on, I would say, oh, fantastic, all right, I'm going to sell all this product. But what I do is I contact these people and say, I don't think you should do that because there are all sorts of problems that you could be creating by putting shielding around your house. Basically, just don't do it unless it's a last resort and unless you've actually spoken to us first, because most of the times that people want to shield, they shouldn't be doing it at all, right? It's just completely the wrong thing to do. And you can, as I say, make your exposure worse by reflecting signals from your inside devices back in towards you. So in terms of precaution and what we can do, it's less easy than it used to be because there are so many sources of it and there are so many factors to keep in mind. And so for me, and my background is in teaching, for me the thing is understand this, come back, do one of our online courses, understand how these fields behave and understand the right solutions to put in place, because what you do in your place might be different to what your cousin 3 suburbs away does, because you'll have different equipment in your home, you'll have different exposure from neighbours or mobile phone towers outside. We're all different. So solutions will be different.
Yes, so the problem of it's a bit like coming back to the environmental chemicals and environmental exposure. It's you would think air pollution, water pollution, what's going on outside the house is the really big problem. But if you make responsible, it actually turns out the chemicals you're exposed to in your house are huge. And if you make responsible decisions, you can reduce your chemical load by 80 or 90%. And so something that seems incredibly overwhelming, environmental toxins, suddenly becomes more manageable. And I think the same is true for electromagnetic pollution as well. So you've mentioned a couple of things. Let's just list out a few things that people could be doing or should be doing to minimize their exposure. And of course, the thing about it is measuring it confirms how well you're doing. But let's give a couple of suggestions.
Number one, find out what's emitting radiation in your home. So I'm just talking about radiation now. Make a list of all the devices that you and your kids, your family use, to be the baby monitors and all the mobile phones. Make a list and have a look at it. And that's maybe your starting point. Yes, measure what's coming out of each of these things, and then work out that allows you to work out what you can do about it. So you can say, there's this much radiation coming out of my baby monitor. Am I going to leave it in the cot next to my baby's head, or am I going to do something about it? But that information will help you make that decision. And whatever decision you make is fine with me, as long as you make it from an informed perspective. So number three, look for or buy safe technologies. Why are we buying radiating modems and routers when you can have, as I do, radiation-free modems and routers? I've got radiation-free computer. So there's still safe technology that we can be putting in place. And if we set our home up so we've got safe technology in place, then we don't need to carry these little wireless transmitters around in our pockets or wherever it might be in our bras that are irradiating us, because we can go and we can sit down at this safe technology and we can do what we need to do. I think also we need to think about what's happening in our cars. There's a lot of wireless technology in our cars. A lot of the technology we use in our cars, we carry into the cars with it, our tablets, our phones and so forth. Do we need to? Can we leave it at home? Can we go radiation free for a day, for a weekend, for a little while? What do we want in our home to achieve? What do we want our kids exposed to? And how can we get to that outcome? I think kids' exposure is really critical too, because I've been watching some kids that have been suffering from anxiety and noticing that they're wearing earpods and smart watches. Now, this is really distressing to me, because if you look at the research, these wireless devices and the use of basically social media is associated with anxiety. So we're creating anxious kids by encouraging them, allowing them to use this technology. I don't think anybody should be using wireless earpods. Again, we don't need them.
Mm-hmm. I know I've seen images of Wi-Fi or radiation penetration into brains, and I know that kids are a lot more vulnerable to that than adults, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely, because their skulls are a lot thinner, so that radiation is penetrating further. And so for an adult, your penetration is just a part of the brain. But for a child, it's most of the child's brain. For a young child, most of the child's brain that's absorbed the radiation. And that modelling was done with mobile phones held out here. But when we've got earpods, they're inside the ear. They're that much closer to the brain. Plus, we've got one in here and one in here.
Yes.
So we're irradiating both sides of the brain. Now, this to me is really, really concerning and totally unnecessary.
The ear pods, I mean, they must be, I mean, that's how they work. They must be emitting a great deal more radiation than these wired headphones that we have used to use to plug into our phones. And they were emitting radiation as well, but what them are them obviously there's more in the pods.
Well, it's a radiating device, and again, you can measure. So if you take one out of your ear and measure it with a meter, you'd be surprised what's coming out. But the thing is, you don't need it at all, because we have, although we're out of stock at the moment, we have radiation-free air tube headsets. So they don't emit radiation and they don't conduct radiation into your head. So you get the same end result. You're still listening to what you want to listen to, but you're doing it without radiation. And there are lots of alternatives that we can come up with to these radiating devices, but we have to first be aware that A, they're in our home, that our kids are using them, and B, that they're a potential problem.
You mentioned you've got a computer that is not radiating. Now, how does that, I mean, other than switching off the Wi-Fi radiation, which may or may not work, I mean, even switching off the computer may or may not work, what are you doing there? Tell us a little bit more about how you've covered that base.
Oh, well, our wonderful tech guy built it for me. So he built it without radiation, without the ability to emit radiation, which is great. I have a laptop as well that has got the capacity for Wi-Fi, but it's always turned off. But for my work, I always use this computer that's completely radiation free, and I've set up my kids' homes too, so that they've got radiation free computers and radiation free modems and routers. So actually, they've got landline phones too, so that I know that they've got the ability to access technology safely.
I know when I was renovating my home, they were putting speakers up in the ceilings, and he just said, "Oh, well, we're putting Wi-Fi speakers." And I said, "No, no, 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 hang on. You're not putting Wi-Fi speakers up. Put the blue cable to it, and the blue cable is the Ethernet cable. That's not emitting radiation. Is that right?"
Yeah, well, if you don't use radiation, you have to use cables. So Ethernet cables, yes, great. But you can also, if you can get, or people, if they want to, can get their electrician to run cabling through the roof, or it can be even outside. There are different ways that you can do it very discreetly, so that you can have access to the internet wherever you want it in your home. So it can be done. I mean, I'm set up so that I have access to the internet in multiple rooms, downstairs and upstairs in my home, without cables running all through the place. But you can have cables running through the place if you want. But what you have to be aware of is that if you attach something with an Ethernet cable, it doesn't stop the radiation. If it's a radiating device, the radiating device is still going to be giving out radiation. You have to actually use a device that's not radiating, or make sure that you can get into the settings and turn off the radiation, and then measure and make sure that the radiation is turned off.
Because I cannot imagine you would buy a single device in any shop nowadays without the ability to have Wi-Fi connection.
It's very hard. And even things like keyboards and a mouse, it used to be they're all wired in, and now all of that stuff is going wireless. You still can buy it, and I make sure I have a little stash of those things so that they'll do me into the future. But I don't know whether, you can't see the cable to my mouse. How is having a cable to my mouse an inconvenience? I really have to say, what is the problem? These wires are great things.
Yeah. You also mentioned baby monitors, and as a grandfather with several young grandchildren, baby monitors. Does distance make a difference? Does distance make a difference? I mean,
well, sort of, but the thing is that this equipment is designed to be sending a signal a long way. So if you take your one end of the baby monitor and then go outside into the yard, down the street, wherever you want to go, how far can you go and still connect? And if you can go a long way, that's how far the radiation is traveling. So if your baby is lying, if you can see my hands, if your baby's lying that far away from it, of course it's going into your baby's body. It's going a long way.
Yeah. Lyn, look, I had to get you back on to talk about this because, 5G is supposedly a big improvement. What's your thoughts on, it's clearly not a good thing. 5G, how has that changed the landscape?
This 5G is hugely problematic. One reason is that it has never been tested for safety, and I'm talking about the sort of emissions that we're getting in the environment, real-time signals. They have never been tested for safety. So we're rolling out a technology and we're putting it outside nearly everybody's homes. We're exposing nearly everybody to it right throughout the world without ever having any real signal testing for safety. So that's one thing. The number of transmitters, as I said, that they will be really close to people's homes, right outside people's bedrooms in many cases. That's another thing. But the third thing is the characteristics of 5G. 5G is going to operate in ways that the other generations haven't operated. So they have things called beam steering technology. So if you're walking or driving down the street with your 5G device, the mobile phone tower is going to be able to basically follow you, or the signal is going to be able to follow you as you're doing that. So instead of just driving through it in a short period of time, you're going to be in that signal for a longer period of time. So we haven't had that kind of technology before. We don't know what the impacts of that are going to be. Plus, we've got a whole lot of different frequencies that largely haven't been used or we haven't been exposed to very much before. Now, in Australia, we're getting a lot of 5G mobile phone towers that are built at 3.5 gigahertz. And of course, the signals will comply with the standard. And if you look on the information that the tech company sends you, it will be saying things like, oh, it's only this % of the standard. It's, it complies with standard, no problem, essentially. But what has been found in Sweden is that people exposed to this particular frequency have started to develop a whole lot of symptoms after a 5G 3.5 gigahertz antenna was installed near their home or their holiday house or whatever it might be, or their workplace. And so these people were okay with 3G and 4G antennas, but come the 3.5 gigahertz 5G antennas, they started to get sick. And it's all sorts of things: fatigue, nervous system problems, burning of the skin, memory and concentration problems, a whole range of symptoms. Then when those people went away, some of them were so badly affected that they had to get out of their homes and go and stay somewhere else. When they got out of that situation, they started to regain their health. Then when they went back into their homes, maybe to pack up some clothes to leave, the symptoms came back. So we've got now, I think, 7 studies that were done by this team in Sweden showing these sorts of effects. But what I'm finding is that I'm seeing that with people in Australia, and they're ringing me up and saying, look, I was fine with this mobile phone tower that was outside before, but now the 3.5 gigahertz 5G antennas have been turned on and I'm feeling terrible. And then they go through and tell me the symptoms that they're experiencing. And this is kind of heartbreaking, to be honest, because this shouldn't be happening. And this is hard for people because they've then got to come back and protect themselves. Nobody out there is listening to them. Our government is not listening to them. Our tech companies are not listening to them. They are not going to make things better for these people who are suffering. It comes back to these people to work out what can they do to protect themselves in their homes. And so I'm working with a few people who are in that situation at the moment. But I'd be really happy if in my business I didn't have to, because it's as I said, heartbreaking to see families, not just individuals, but, parents and children who are affected in this way.
The 5G ability to track you means there must be a lot more 5G towers or stations or whatever. What do we call them? Emitters?
Well, probably antennas.
Antennas.
Yeah, we've had the big mobile phone towers that have had 5G put on them, but what the companies are doing is, because 5G signals don't travel quite as far as some of the other technologies, they're putting them closer together. So what you're getting is on light poles, you're getting 5G antennas. So the problem is that the light poles are so close to people's homes. You know how little space there is between your home and the light pole. If there's a 5G antenna on it, it's really close to your home, and you might have big glass windows at the front that signal's coming right in through. And I had one woman tell me that she was really concerned about that and talking to people in her street about this sort of antenna, and the people in her street were basically attacking her because they wanted their 5G.
Yes. Well, we've seen public health. There's a whole story there which we could divert to. But, people feeling this is an affront to them to even raise the issue that this could be bad for you. How dare you? How dare you? How dare you? Look, let's finish on a positive note, because I'm guessing you could go out with this measuring device and measure in the street the 5G signal as well. But let's finish on some positive notes. The people can do and get some control, because focusing on controlling what you can control is a good way to go, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think we have to remember that we are powerful. As individuals, we are the people who create the society of tomorrow, and it's our choices now that create that. And so I think it's really important what choices we make, what choices about the technology that we have in our homes, and what we buy. So the reason that this is such a lucrative business for the technology companies, and that they're rolling out technology even though it's potentially probably quite dangerous, the reason they can do that is because we're buying it. If we don't buy it and we don't use it, what we do is we create a market for safe products. And those safe products are disappearing from the shelves at the moment, and we will only be able to sustain them if people buy them and use them and put them in our homes. So that's something really practical that we can do. So we protect our home, but we create a positive change in society. And then I think educate ourselves, be aware that we can measure what's in our homes and we can control it. We can either get rid of it, we can put safe technology in place, we can shield if we absolutely have to, and we've got some good advice, but there are things that we can do to protect our homes. And we can also work on our health, because as we become healthier and stronger, we are more able to resist the impacts of this technology. So I think this is our personal journey. This is a challenge that we've been given to actually give us an incentive to make ourselves stronger.
Well, Lyn, that's a great note to finish on, and I know you've made a special offer, and I'll mention that in the outro, and we'll have links to your website, of course. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Oh, thank you so much, Ron. I'm very passionate about this, so it's a great pleasure to be talking to you and your listeners. Thank you for having me.
Well, as I said, it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous, and to ignore it is it's naive at best and actually silly at worst, because we are walking electricity. Literally every cell in our body undergoes what is called the electron transport chain. That's what produces ATP, the currency of energy in our cells, in our bodies. We need the sun. The sun provides us with important UVB light, energy, and that helps power us as well. In fact, nothing on Earth grows without the sun. But we somehow have immersed ourselves and come to accept this form of radiation, which we carry on our bodies, put by our beds, bathe our homes in Wi-Fi radiation, as being safe. And there is, as we mentioned in this episode, the European Union has what's called the precautionary principle, which is if something has the potential to cause harm, then we should approach it cautiously. And the manufacturers of that potential problem, should prove that it is safe for human health. And there is a conflict of interest here again. And like chemical toxins, of which there are literally tens of thousands, and you would hope they were regulated, but only a very small percentage of them are, and none of them are tested in combination, which is how we experience them, and none of them are tested over many years for different age groups and different health, and in combination with different health conditions and medications, etc. That's chemical toxins. And it can be overwhelming, it can be depressing, but the good news is that by making informed decisions, you can reduce your chemical toxin load, environmental toxin load, by 80 or 90%. And, well, the same is true of electromagnetic radiation. With knowledge comes power, and this knowledge should empower you to approach this more cautiously. And I would suggest that turning things off, well, Lyn's even mentioned that doesn't help. I'll be testing that. I'll certainly be having links to Lyn's website where measuring in the house can be a real eye-opener. And I know it has been for me. And listen, I'm aware of this. I'm also using this kind of technology, but I try and keep it at least 2 meters away from my head at night. I don't have Wi-Fi on at night. I probably should switch the whole house off at night. I don't do that. But anyway, you can decide how to engage with this, but it's at least you're making an informed decision. And by making informed choices, you can, if you like, reduce your exposure to electromagnetic radiation by a considerable amount. I would imagine 70 or 80% at least. So we'll have links to Lyn's website on our show notes, which are www.emraustralia.com.au. EMR Australia is one word, .com.au. I hope this finds you well. Until next time, this is Dr. Ron Ehrlich. Be well. Feeling stressed, overwhelmed? It's time to unstress your life. Join the Unstress Health community and transform stress into strength. Build mental fitness. From self-sabotage to self-mastery. And together, let's not just survive, but thrive. Expert-led courses, curated podcasts, like-minded community and support, and much more. Visit unstresshealth.com today. This podcast provides general information and discussion about medicine, health, and related subjects. The content is not intended and should not be construed as medical advice or as a substitute for care by a qualified medical practitioner. If you or any other person has a medical concern, he or she should consult with an appropriately qualified medical practitioner. Guests who speak in this podcast express their own opinions, experiences, and conclusions.